Hello children, today we will begin with Unit 2.4, The Fall of Troy. This is an interesting epic story of the history of Greece. It is a story of passion, strategies, hatred, and victory. It unfolds the breathtaking occurrences that has made a great history in Europe. Now children, I will be explaining the part from this passage. Okay, so now we will begin with part 1. I'll begin with the explanation directly. So children, epics are great stories or long poems about great heroes or even the war histories. Just like in India, we have Ramayana and Mahabharata. The Europeans have their epics like the Iliad and the Odyssey. Like in India, we all know about Ram, Sita, Yudhishthira, Arjuna, and Draupadi. In the same way, the Europeans or the Western countries know the names of Hector, Odysseus, and Achilles, and Helen of Troy. She was the most beautiful woman in the world. It was because of her beauty that led to the war between Greek and Trojans for 10 long years. Now children, in this passage, epic story of southern Europe was told in Greece and some parts of Turkey called Fall of Troy. In the early times, no one knew who was the author of these epics. Okay, that is the Iliad and the Odysseus. But as years passed on, many different singers sang it and passed on from one generation to the other. Then one great poet gave the story a proper form, and it was Homer, who was a blind poet who composed and recited this long poem. He used to walk through the roads of the villages of the Greek city and used to sing his poems to the people. And those people used to warmly welcome him in their houses and he used to recite his poems. This poet has been honored not only in Greece but in all of Europe as the father of European poetry. Now children, in this lesson we will learn about the story of Iliad. It portrays the battle between the ancient kingdoms of Troy, that is Turkey in the present day. You all can see that in the map that is given to you. And Sparta, that is the present Greece. Okay, so the war or the battle was between Turkey and Greece. The city of Troy was a trading city in Asia Minor. The city was favorable for trading and agriculture. They traded over the sea with ships carrying goods from the Aegean Sea and through the Black Sea. They carried goods like grains and vegetables with their ships. The city was protected from behind by Mount Ida. The city had everything that it needed, like good crops like corn. It had fertile land, rich grass for the cattle to feed on, and the people living in the city of Troy were called as Trojans. So, In order to protect themselves, they had built a strong wall round their city. The wall was so broad that people could easily walk and sit on it. The huge gate that protected them were kept open during the normal times, but it was closed during the war times. So the city was fairly protected by the walls and the Mount Ida from behind, as it was the highest peak and it would be difficult for the enemies to cross that mountain. So, children, the city of Troy was well protected and strongly defended by their brave soldiers. But this good time did not last for long. Once, when the Trojan prince Paris was on a visit with the Greek king Menelaus, Paris saw Menelaus's wife Helen, who was very beautiful. So he fell in love with her and was attracted towards her. And then he convinced her to run away along with him to the city of Troy. So the Greeks were very angry on the Trojan prince Paris because he had taken away the wife of their king Menelaus. So now they decided to take revenge on Troy, that is the city of Troy, and declared war against the city of Troy. Soon after that, the Greeks sailed to the Troy and surrounded the city with their soldiers. The Trojans also fought very hard, and this war continued for 10 long years. So, children, in these years, every day they fought against each other, and both of them failed to win the battle. On some days, there used to be battle between two armies, and on other days, two kings fought single battles. Every day, the Trojans came out of their gate, and Greeks came out of their ships and tents and fought the battle. But still, the battle wasn't over. So now, children, in these years of fighting, many great heroes from both the sides, like the brave Hector from the city of Troy, was killed by Achilles from the Greek side, and Achilles too was killed by a poisonous arrow that had entered his heels. And children, that was the only part of his body that was open, as he had covered his body with the armor. But still his luck wasn't good enough, and so he was killed. Then the main prince because of whom this war started, that is Prince Paris, was also killed with a poisonous arrow. Both the sides, that is the Trojans and the Greeks, were very tired of fighting, as the Troy city was closed for so many years, and the people there were fed up of being closed inside the city. And the Greeks too were far away from their homes and wanted to meet their family members. But still the fighting continued. They did not fight, they did not stop the war. Now, children, this is part 2 of the lesson, The Fall of Troy. Now, as the war between them continued, there was one that gave victory to the Greeks. The Greeks used a trick to defeat the Trojans. For 10 long years, they were trying to defeat, or they were trying to, enter the city of Troy, but they failed to do so. Now, the legendary king Odysseus of Greek made a cunning plan, a wicked plan to cheat the Trojans and win the war. Odysseus thought that they would only be able to capture the city if they can get inside the city. He decided to build a huge wooden horse which could hold men inside of it. And after building the horse, they would burn their tents and pretend to sail away so that the Trojans would think that the Greeks have ran away. So the Greeks, instead of going away, will hide themselves near an island, and when it would be night time, they would come back when the Trojans would be asleep. They would attack the city and burn and kill and destroy the entire city. So the Greek leaders agreed to the plan of Odysseus. Now, the great horse was built by a skillful engineer, and the ones who went inside the horse were Odysseus and Menelaus. They both of them entered the horse along with some of their soldiers, and the last one who entered the horse was the architect who himself had built the horse, because he was the only one who knew the secret opening and shutting of the entrance of the horse. Now, they did as they had planned. They sailed away and hid near an island and burnt their tents and left on only one man behind, who would act in front of the Trojans when they would see the horse and take it inside the city. So now, next day, when the Trojans woke up and thought of going to fight as they had done all these 10 years, when they saw outside, they couldn't see any Greek soldier near the shore, and all the tents were burnt and ships had gone. So now the Trojans felt that this long war was finally over. They all opened their gates and were very happy that they were free and the war was over. Then all of a sudden, on the seashore, they spotted a huge wooden horse. They all gathered near the horse and started looking at it in amazement. When the Trojans were looking at the horse, they found a Greek man whose hands were tied together and was lying under the horse. The Trojan dragged him out and started asking him different sorts of questions of why they had left this horse there and why the Greeks ran away. The Greek man pretended to be frightened and did not speak. But when the Trojans threatened him to kill, he opened his mouth and he told them a false story. Now, the Greek who was acting to be frightened, he was acting because they had planned all this. So, as he was acting to be frightened, started his fake story, the false story that was already planned, that the Greeks were tired of the long war and wanted to go back home. Thus they went away, but as they were scared of the long journey that they had to travel through the ship to reach back home, so in order to make the gods happy and so that they may be safely, landed at their homes, so that they may be protected in their journey, they made an offering to God by making that huge horse. Okay, that was an offering to God. This was the story that he was telling. And the Greek, the man who was narrating the story, further said that they also wanted to kill him and offer him as a sacrifice to the sea god but somehow he escaped and hid himself. Then some of the other Trojans asked him that why did they build such a huge horse for the offering? To this, the cunning Greek man gave a smart reply that if they had built a smaller horse, then the Trojans would have taken away that horse into their city, and then the luck would go to the Trojans and not to the Greeks. That is why they built a huge horse which would not fit inside the Trojans' gate. Now, children, did you understand how the Greeks fooled the Trojans? The Trojans were so foolish that they believed in everything that the cunning Greek man told them. And now that they thought that the Greeks had gone away, they were very happy, and their happiness went on to an extent that they thought that now the war was over and they did not need the wall anymore. So now they decided to make a hole in the wall and drag the horse inside the city. But the wise man, that is a wise priest who had all the experience, warned the young Trojans that this horse could be a trick, made by the Greeks to destroy the Trojans. The priest further said that if the walls would be broken down, then they would bring a great danger to the city. But the young Trojans were so excited that they did not pay any attention to the wise priest's advice, and they broke down a part of their strong wall and dragged the horse inside the city. Now the Trojans were very happy that the war was finally over and the Greeks had gone away. They feasted, they celebrated and drank the entire day, and at night they went to sleep peacefully. But children, that day of joy and happiness ended by night, full of killings and screams and fire. As night approached, the Greek ships that were hiding at the nearby island started coming back to the shore. The group of ships was led by Agamemnon. Agamemnon was the brother of Menelaus, whose wife had eloped, which had a red light. The ship that was Agamemnon's had a red light, as a signal, so that the Greeks who were on the shore could see it. So the ship had a red light high on the mast, on the top of the ship they had a red light. Now the Greek man who was waiting on the shore for the ships to return, as soon as he saw the ship returning, he crawled near the horse where it was placed in the city and gave them a signal that the ships had arrived. As soon as they were signaled, They opened the side of the horse and climbed out and opened the gates so that the rest of the Greek army could enter the city. Now, the entire Greek army were inside the city, where all the Trojans were sleeping peacefully. They didn't even imagine that something like this would happen to them. Immediately, the Greeks started setting the house, towers, and palaces on fire and began to burn and kill everyone they saw. Now, the entire city was filled with fire that was spreading very fast and consuming the entire city. That night, which was earlier silent and peaceful, was filled with shouting of people being killed and the noise of the weapons and the cries of the weeping women. Now the Trojans were woken up by these noises, and it was a big surprise for them as they saw that their enemies were inside their city. Many of the Trojans were killed even before they could get up off their beds and wear their armors. The night sky above was bright due to the fire that was burning the houses, temples, and towers. Some of the Trojans tried to fight as well as they could, but it was very late as all the army had entered and had killed almost all of them. One of the Trojans' old king, that is Priam, was killed with all his brave sons. Hector, who was killed earlier, his old mother, his wife, and sister were taken away as slaves by the Greeks. King Menelaus was searching the entire city for his wife Helen. As he was searching for her, he found her in the palace. Now, as soon as Menelaus came in front of her, she looked down in shame and sorrow, for she had betrayed her husband, and it was difficult to face her first husband. Her voice was choked with emotions. She couldn't speak anything. But Menelaus, instead of punishing her, forgave her and took her back with him, as he thought that it was only Aphrodite. Now, children, Aphrodite is an ancient Greek goddess of love and beauty. So, Menelaus thought that the evil that made his wife go away from her home, her husband, and child, and forgave her. As it was morning, the entire city of Troy was destroyed, which had protected themselves for 10 long years. Everything was destroyed. Nothing remained of the city of Troy. Okay, children, now we have completed with the explanation of this lesson. Thank you for listening. Take care.